Good evening. I would like to call the November 15th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting to order. Please note this meeting is being hosted through live stream on the city's website and by teleconference via Zoom. I would like to remind the Planning Commission to have their microphones turned on and positioned so the audience could hear. Director Kang, may we please have a roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Robert Booth.
Present.
Commissioner Dana Hill.
Here.
Commissioner John Worth.
Here.
Vice Chair Jacob Beamsterfer.
Here.
And Chair Cindy Lemke.
Present.
All present.
Commissioner Booth, may we have the invocation and flag salute?
United States
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we give you this night, I just thank you for this team that's been assembled. I just ask that you would bless our community, help us further it for its own good, its citizens, its businesses. Wise, judicious decisions in Jesus' name. Amen.
Approval of the minutes for the Planning Commission meeting November 1st, 2022.
I just had a comment. The minutes are very minor and very they don't cover a lot of what was discussed. I talked about that in the past. I'd like to have a little bit more, if possible, a little more information, a little more expansion of what's actually discussed. I think that's important. A case in point on this one is some of the public comment that we received. I think that was some important public comment. But just as maybe a suggestion to staff, if possible, I know in years past there's been a lot more, and it's an effort for sure, but just maybe a little more expansion of what's discussed. But with that, I have no other comments, and we'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you. Approved unanimously. Agenda number 5 is the public comment period for items not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public present that would like to comment on a note on the agenda via Zoom or online, or did you receive any emails, Ms. Hernandez?
I did not receive any e-comments, and I don't show anyone via Zoom wanting to comment.
Item 6A for tentative track map 38309 and administrative adjustment 22-003 for Ramona Creek.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Monique Alanis Flater. The item before you tonight, tentative track map 38309 and administrative adjustment 22-003 for Ramona Creek specific plan is a subdivision within the Ramona Creek specific plan phase 1. The applicant has requested that this item be continued to the December 6th Planning Commission meeting to allow time to finalize some design considerations.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for staff?
Nope.
I'd like to open this public hearing. Are there any members present online or e-comments for this item?
Chair Lemke, no e-comments received, and I don't show anyone online wanting to comment.
Thank you. We will leave this public hearing open. Commissioners, can I ask for a motion to extend the item?
Sure. I'll make a motion to extend the planning, continue this item to the meeting of December 6th, 2022.
A second.
And that was approved unanimously. Item 6B for zoning ordinance amendment 22-001, Director Kang.
Good evening. So before you tonight is a zoning ordinance amendment 22-001. This is city initiated proposal to amend various sections of chapter 90 of the Hemet Municipal Code in Division 2, nonconformities of Article 2, administrative regulations, and Article 3, special uses and conditions. So basically, in the last few years, we had a lot of different projects to come through the city that business owners had existing alcohol beverage control businesses or tobacco control businesses, which they wanted to sell to another buyer. But our current code did not allow that to occur without going through a process. So what we're bringing you before the commission is that we're rewriting the entire nonconformity section, as you've seen it in red line strikeout, as well as providing some options for the commissioners on how that would occur. And I'll go through that in a little more detail. So basically, the non-conforming lots and land uses and structures are existing due to various factors. One is that they've been established prior to city incorporation, or that they were established in the county days, or they were established when we didn't have a regulations or requirements for that. So for instance, for alcohol sales, someone could have established an alcohol sales market that never required or never went through the conditional use permit process. So the current code requires them to go through a conditional use permit process for that type of use. What that means is that we're modifying or changing this section to allow for that use to be considered deemed approved. And all that means is that we're accepting the way they have established it without going through the additional current regulations to make them legal. We're just accepting them as legal establishment at that point. And by doing that, we're incorporating the certain conditions that are already outlined in that ordinance, and that they would have to comply with that ordinance going forward. And basically what that does is when we, meaning the commissioners, approve a conditional use permit for a certain use, it comes with conditions of approval. And that gives the commission and the public to make comments and make those adjustments to make sure that they're not going to have public health and safety and welfare issues going forward. This just places those conditions into as an automatic item for them to be complied with. And those items are listed in the staff report. If you go to, let's see, page 4, it identifies the first 10 for the alcohol sales, and second set of 8 will be for the tobacco sales. So they're not long conditions, but rather just some performance standards that we would apply for those existing businesses. And what also this does is that it gives certain exemptions, like we discussed, for businesses as deemed approved. And one is in an instance of change in ownership or an owner-to-owner transfer of alcohol beverage control license, or reestablishment or restoration or repair of an existing alcohol use on the same lot after total or partial destruction due to damage of fire, riot, insurrections, and so on. And third is temporary closure of not more than 90 days for repairs, renovations, and remodeling. So that gives certain flexibility for those business owners to continue that operation without having to go through the conditional use permit process. If you like, we could go into details. I could take any questions. Monique is also here to answer any questions. So it's up to the commissioner how you would like to proceed. I could just take questions. Monique can also answer that.
Yeah.
Commissioners, would you like to ask some questions?
Well, I do have some questions. So these conditions that you want to just, I guess, in a sense, automatically get in place so it doesn't come before the commission every single time. Is there a cost associated with change of ownership? And isn't that really the reason that the business owners are complaining is because of the cost associated with this change in ownership and movement?
So the cost for this particular process that we're putting forth as deemed approved would only be a business license, a new business license cost. But they would not incur any conditional use permit or any of the entitlement processing on through planning.
Okay, so you're eliminating that as well.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I might come back with another question, but
Other commissioners, do you have any questions?
What if the building, as you're saying, is an older what if it's not necessarily up to ADA, because some things are grandfathered in, but somebody comes over and buys a new place and they do, let's just say they change the layout, move the shelves around or something like that, but they're not really doing any construction per se. What happens in that case where like fire department with the sprinklers or ADA on an older business? How does that apply to the new owner if he's taking over from the old business?
So this deals with the entitlement portion. The
Oh.
actual changes would just go under TI, tenant improvement. But there's limitations on what the city can require. For instance, if somebody's just changing the counter location, that would not qualify them to put in a whole new sprinkler system. So there's limitations on what the city can do on that.
And of course, I'm assuming the new owner will apply with ABC and they do a background check
Correct.
on them and everything.
Correct. That portion is county ABC protocol. So we would just follow whatever the ABC protocol would be.
so how many complaints have you had from business owners in this? Is this a major complaint that has been registered?
It's not a major number of complaints, but we do get them frequently. I would say possibly 1 or 2 a month. If you
Really?
want to have someone transfer the license, or if they were looking to purchase a business within town. So
Okay.
1 or 2 would be what I would say.
So in your opinion, has it deterred any new business in the area?
Some have, just because they have to go through the time that for the processing as well as the
Mhm.
cost associated with it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We get 1 or 2 requests a month to buy or transfer ownership of alcohol stores in this town.
Alcohol, tobacco, or any other businesses that are not up to par on conformities.
But this only changes, or this only changes the conditional use permit requirement for alcohol and tobacco.
That's the main concept, but it also deals with all the non-conformity structures as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's just as a general thought. I mean, first off, there is a ton of red on this, and there is a tremendous amount of things taken away and things added. And it spent a long time reading it, but I still am very unclear on the staff report showed a few things, but there's so much more in this than and first off, I would be on all the sections that were deleted.
Mhm.
Was it just all deleted and then a lot of it was replaced and changed? And so first off, I would much rather see what's been changed instead of, because I'm trying to go back and forth between what was deleted and then what was added, and wait a minute, that's the same without,
Like a single document with like the black and the red.
yeah, and instead of just because I'm trying to understand what's been changed. So just reading this, it's really hard to understand what's in it. But in a general sense, I'm concerned about removal of the public review process. I understand that we want to also promote, businesses coming in and making improvements to and bringing things that are non-conforming up to standard. There's a couple things in here that I'm really interested in knowing more about. One is the administrative hearing processes that is that a new element to this? Do we have so So if I read this correctly, there's an administrative hearing process that's in place for deemed approved non-conforming, legal non-conforming use sites. And then that process provides a mechanism by which the city can go and make sure that that improvements are made or corrections are made. Do we not have that same process right now for a conditional use permitted business? Is that the same process?
Yes, so what we wanted to do was, I understand your concern about not being able to see one-to-one relationship on what's been changed and what's remaining the same. There's a slight nuanced language changes within the entire document. So rather than try to make it even more confusing by striking out only portions of the sentences and adding additional sentences, this would have made it clearer as to show exactly what the full document would look like once the changes occur. The non-conforming section was always there. We just didn't have this deemed approved section within our existing nonconformity section. So we added that component. So the only section that we really added was the not deemed approved section and the 90-91, which talks about the performance standards for tobacco store. All the other deemed approved is language change, but the content in itself did not change. So it's just a different way of saying the same thing, but this was a cleaner version or the more efficient version of it. So if you take a look at it, the content of nonconformity has always been there. We haven't removed that. It's just because if we had to cut portions of this sentence and that sentence, put a new sentence in there, it would have been really messy. And that's why we just put it the way we did it. But I understand your concern that you can't really see one-to-one relationship of
and
each
that's
section that's been changed to another section. I understand that.
That makes me uncomfortable because I mean, there's 30, 40, 50 pages or whatever of new stuff. There's like 12 pages of deleted stuff. And so it's a very significant, potentially a huge significant change. And I would rather see it on what's changed, you know, and I spent a lot of time going back and forth, like section by section, copying and pasting and putting this up here and say, okay, well, how is that different? How's that? And that would make me a lot more comfortable to give a thorough review and assessment of what's being proposed. I mean, in concept, I agree that it would be a value to find a way to bring non-conforming uses up to conformance. And however we can do that process, I think that's good. Specific to alcohol and tobacco, I mean, one of the things that always comes up is our ABC, the concentration, everything else. I am concerned about removing the CUP process for alcohol and tobacco. I mean, that's where we get the majority of public comment on those types of projects.
I'm new. Can you explain what you just said so I can understand?
That's,
Sorry.
No worries. So the conditional use permit is something that requires where a new project comes in and it requires a public hearing like this. So the public has an opportunity to provide comment. What our current code says is that a alcohol or tobacco, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this will help me make sure I understand what I read. But what our current code says is that an alcohol or tobacco store that, well, currently every alcohol and tobacco store needs a conditional use permit, meaning that it goes through that
Right.
public hearing process. But there are existing alcohol and tobacco stores that don't have a conditional use permit because they were in place
Grandfathered.
prior to that requirement. But our code also says that upon change of ownership, then it has to come back in for a conditional use permit. So that initiates that public review process.
I got you.
What this is doing is removing that requirement. So any business, any alcohol or tobacco store that sells out to another company, they don't have to go through the public review process. They can get approved ministerially, right through, I mean, with the requirements, but just
Like the the conditional use permit just slides down to the new ownership.
No,
right?
there
Like,
is no conditional use
No.
permit. They're changed to this new status, which is deemed approved, which grandfathers that approval in, but then it removes the requirement for a new CUP. Then I'm good with like that deemed approval process and bringing a non-conformance into it, but I'm questioning and I'm concerned that this is at the high level without really understanding all the pages. But I'm questioning the removal of the public hearing process for that change. So
Yes, so
does that
I
make
didn't know what
sense?
CUP was. That was,
Sorry.
yeah.
Conditional use.
conditional use.
oh, gosh. Lord.
But eliminate, but if you want to still have the public hearing, doesn't that mean you got to have a CUP?
Right.
So you want to keep the CUP?
I want to keep, well, I'm concerned about removing the requirement for a CUP upon the sale or transfer of that license.
Wait,
for
commissioners, I'm
alcohol.
sorry. Let's get some clarification from HP because I think that's not, let him clarify so that you're a little bit more clear on this, what we're talking about.
So basically what we're trying to do is provide the opportunity for the existing business owners, because if you look at it, if I own business A and I have been operating for the last 15 years, I do not have a CUP. And without this deemed approved component, I have no conditions I need to comply with. Or I have no performance standards I need to meet. So what we're doing is we're placing that into the mix so that they do meet. So for instance, providing security cameras for the facility and so on. So what that does, it provides additional safety measures for the public as well as the business owner, the patrons, and so on. Without this, we can't apply that unless they change the ownership, unless they have expansion of their existing business of some kind of change. And if we're saying if we don't have the deemed approved, then those folks can continue to operate in its current state until such time they feel that they need to sell or they need to expand or what have you. But until that time, there's no mechanism for the city to bring them into compliance to make sure that they meet the performance standards that all the other alcohol sales or tobacco sales stores will comply with going forward.
So if a existing alcohol store has a CUP and they sell, do they have to go through a new CUP process?
No, the CUP stays with the business. It's a land use entitlement.
So it's more like just as is.
Yeah,
Nothing
so if
changed,
it
you're
sells
just
from
straight.
owner A to owner B, and they do the transaction, there's nothing they need to go through the city other than the fact that they just have to get a business license under new ownership. And that's it.
But with this change, it requires them to have all the security cameras and all
Right,
those
there's a-
stipulations in place.
Performance
so-
standards that they need to meet. Yes.
Right.
But
So
if
that
they
means if
wanted
this,
to add that,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jacob.
they wanted to add that, they would have to pull that, correct? If they want to do any change to that building after they own it.
Yeah, even with the deemed approved, you don't have to do anything. You're still required to meet those performance standards. Whether you sell it, whether you transfer it, whether you expand it or not, that deemed approved section of performance standards would apply.
I gotcha.
We're just accepting all the existing businesses as if it went through the city process to have
Already
these conditions in there.
in business.
Again, I apologize if this is a redundant question or it's a stupid question. So with this deemed approved process, would that mean that like mom and pop shops that have been in business for forever and grandfathered in, like are gonna get suffocated with a massive amount of regulation coming at them? Like I've got to do $15,000 worth of repair to get myself into compliance with the city.
No, and that's why I specifically list those components out so that it's not only thing that sorry, scraping. So for instance, there's a public consumption section open container section, which doesn't require any additional funding that they need to do. No loitering signs. Lighting, maybe they need to upgrade, so there may be a cost associated with it. Security surveillance, if they don't already have one, that will cost. Graffiti removal, just a normal maintenance of a building. Display signs, littering, ABC training, additional condition that the city deemed fit to add. So there's only about one or two that would really affect the financial component of a business owner, which I would assume, or I shouldn't assume, I would suggest that any business owner should add to their normal business practice to have graffiti removal, litter removal, surveillance camera for their safety as well as safety of the patrons. So it's nothing in here that's going to cost or generate or require them to break down walls, add different things into it. It's just so that we have certain minimum standards for these businesses to
Right.
operate safely.
Yeah.
It was a good question. Any other questions or comments, Commission?
I think just to follow up, like what would be the, and I'm sure it's in here, it's just a lot to read. I'm a speed reader, but I still have not finished all of it. So like, is there a time frame associated with coming into this process, like finishing this process, or coming into compliance with the city?
So let me kind of put it in a different way. We're not going to go out to each business
No.
and say, you got to do these things and you have certain time frame to do that. All we're saying is if they ever become a problem, then we can cite these sections to say,
I see.
hey, you need to have these things in line.
I see. Okay.
We're not going to each business and say, we just adopted this ordinance. You have to meet all these requirements
Right.
within the next 90 days. We're not going to do that.
I'm not comfortable with this much deletion and this much addition. And the fact, I mean, we haven't had I like what you're saying. I'd like to know more about that administrative hearing process. I would just personally like to, I'd also like to see this document in a form where it shows what the actual changes are, because that might be a lot less. I mean, and that's just probably because I do a lot of, personally, that's how I do a lot of work in track changes. So I know how to work through that. So I understand the intent to try to keep it as clean as possible, but I just, there's a lot here. And any time that we're removing a public hearing process, I'm concerned. And that's an area that I'm not comfortable.
Commissioner Worth, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
We can discuss this in the public comments, the public hearing. But if you have any questions for staff, this is the time to do that. Otherwise, I can open the public hearing for
Yeah, that's good.
discussion.
Yeah, please
Okay.
do.
I do have another question for staff that's going on in the red ink here. Did you change when it comes to repair, renovation, and remodeling, did you guys extend that day? From what I'm gathering, it looks like you may have moved it to 180 days versus 90 days. There are several different things that change in day wise. I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding that. So if anybody wants to, I mean, just for example, there's a gas station on Stetson that's been remodeled for quite some time. But so are we extending that remodeling date to 6 months, basically, for them to remodel for 6 months, 180 days?
No, I believe so if you already have a conditional use permit in hand while you're operating, then the time doesn't matter. It's only those people that do not have any formal approval process that would be affecting this. So let's say you have a market, you have a conditional use permit, you have an alcohol license, and you go into a remodel process. That's okay. That's okay.
And even for those that are deemed approved, that's still okay if they wanted to add a new window on the side of their building, they don't need to pull CUP on that, or do they need to
Correct.
pull?
They don't need
CUP?
to pull a new CUP because the use itself is different than the changes in the building.
So like on downtown Harbor, that's an example where all those walls knocked out for windows that's deemed approved.
No, that particular building does not have anything established as far as the use, meaning the use has to be continuously operated. So let's say a market was there, never got a CUP, never got any license, but then it closed down for a year, and then they want to operate again by another owner, then they would have to go through the new CUP process. It's just the business that's been operating and continue to operate with no pause in between, or very small pause in between, can have that deemed approved process.
Any other questions for the staff, commissioners?
So open up.
All right, with that, we'll open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public present or online that would like to comment on this item? Ms. Hernandez, were there any e-comments received?
I don't show anyone online raising their hand to speak, and I did not receive any e-comments.
Commissioners?
All right, John.
Well, no, I mean, my personal, I mean, we haven't read the whole thing first off. So, I mean, my suggestion, and like I said, I'm not against it, but my suggestion for the commission is that is it possible to get another to get an extension to review this, and then to get it in a Word document to review versus in the PDF that's in track changes, so that we can just review it and then have a chance to finish reading it and answer some of the questions that were brought up. That would be my suggestion, and that would make me feel a lot better personally about supporting it.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that too. I would really like to read, everything sounds great and wonderful. I would personally feel better if I got to read the whole thing through without like blistering through it. You know what I mean? Like, I would feel better about that.
So just in discussion, just kind of clarification of what we talked about. So what we're trying to prove there's a lot. They talking about container buildings here. I mean, there's a lot of things we can talk about on this thing, but the red is just strictly for tobacco and non-conforming lots. But so summary is any tobacco or liquor store that has the licensing, whether it's type 20 or 21, correct, any of those, they can just switch ownerships as deemed approved, as long as it's a running business from one day to the next. And they can expand and open up a window and do any remodeling they want to do without city approval, if it's just gone from one day to the next without closing.
No. Any changes to the structure would require different.
Then they pull CUP.
No. They go to the plan check and permit.
Okay.
Not an entitlement. So there's two different things that we're looking at. Is one is the actual physical changes to the building, and the other is the entitlement, the use of that building.
Got it. Okay.
So deemed approved section will relate to the use of that building, not the changes to that building.
Okay.
The changes to that building. So there's two different things. One is the use of the building, and the other is the building changes itself. So any changes that happens to the building will go through the plan check process as well as permitting process. But that does not require CUP. That does not require an entitlement. What we're talking about is just the entitlement portion, or how you use that building.
So one of the questions I asked earlier, just to clarify, said, so currently, if a existing alcohol business has a CUP and they want to sell it, they can do that without having to go back in for another CUP?
That's correct.
Well, one of the sections that's struck out says permit not, it's a section H, but says permit not, I'll get you a little more specific, what subsection? it's under tobacco stores, but I'll just read it. And this is one of the things that struck out. Notwithstanding section 9042.10, a conditional use permit for a tobacco store applies only to the location for which it is granted and only to the persons to whom it is granted. If the business is sold, the new owners must apply for and obtain a new conditional use permit for that location before assuming the operation of the tobacco store. So that's being struck out, but so that means that it's current right now.
Correct.
So, but I just asked if it was, if a existing business has a conditional use permit and they sell it, you're saying that they didn't have to do another conditional use permit, but it's saying that it does.
That's only for tobacco currently.
But that was my question.
So, Moody, can you expand on that?
Yeah, there's two provisions in the code right now. And what we're trying to do is just clean up what it says with regards to alcohol and then tobacco. And it's been actually quite challenging for us to go through the code and try to figure out what's inconsistent. A provision was added in the tobacco section of the code that required specifically if you have a change of ownership for a tobacco store, regardless if you had the tobacco store existing before, requires you to go through a brand new conditional use permit process. We've had tobacco stores that have existed in the city for quite some time. One specifically on the west side of town, west of Sanderson, the tobacco shop. It's been around for a while. They came in and they submitted for a certificate of occupancy for the new business owner, and we let them know that they were going to need a conditional use permit based on what the code says. And they were very, they were not happy about that. They felt that here we've been here for all this time. It's an existing business. What's the concern? So that's kind of one of the issues we've had, and including alcohol sales too. Other liquor stores that had been in town, they already have an ABC license. They already have the type of license that they're asking for. They're not asking to upgrade it or intensify the ABC license. It's already what they have. And so we've been letting them know too, our code, hey, you need a conditional use permit. This is what it says. But what we weren't looking at is really the opportunity to bring existing alcohol sales type businesses and tobacco stores into some type of compliance, because right now we can't, unless we find out, as Director King indicated, they have a change of ownership when we find out through the business license process. That's the only way for us to even find out about it. So what we're trying to do is just clean that part up to only for businesses that already have an existing license for that type of use. We're not asking for new businesses who would have to come in for a conditional use permit. So you are required, if you want to come into the city and you want a tobacco store or tobacco products, we have very stringent requirements on that. And we also have criteria. So what we also did in here is we're trying to mirror, because those are kind of similar uses and they have similar health and safety issues and community issues. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have criteria set forth for tobacco stores. And we've added that. We did strike out that section in tobacco that talks about ownership, because through this process, through this ordinance, we would acknowledge the new criteria that's being established for tobacco.
So so again, kind of at a high level without getting into all the, and I can understand why it was hard to go through this and try to normalize the wording, but at a high level, there's an objective, and I think it's a good one, to find a way to get to deal with non-conforming status of businesses and to have a mechanism by which to correct things that are not in place. I think that's an awesome objective. But I'm concerned that by setting up this approval of non-conforming that we're removing the requirement of a CUP based on transfer or sale that's already here. I mean, there was another tobacco store a few years ago that they wanted to transfer their license from, I think, Kirby or something up to Florida Avenue. And we went through the CUP process and we addressed some of the issues and some of the concerns. And we had the opportunity to do that through the public hearing process, and the commission was able to be involved. So again, there's a lot of things here there's a lot of data. And I think it's important, if it's going to be this significant of a change, that we read it and we understand it and we have the opportunity to know what those changes are. That's really all that I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm against it or for it. In general, I'm against removing the opportunity for public hearing and having the community able to comment on changes. I think we have an issue in our town on too much alcohol and too much tobacco stores, frankly. I mean, like I said in that public hearing, I really like my tobacco pipe and everything, and I like the real high quality IPA stuff. But one of the issues that always comes up is the over concentration. So that by selling, but whether or not it's an existing with the CUP or a deemed approved non-conforming legal use, the opportunity for selling or transfer may be important for the city and public hearing on how to address some of those issues on a go forward. And if we take that away, I'm a little concerned. So again, my suggestion, my recommendation, before I feel comfortable supporting this, is to be able to read it and understand it. Well, that's what they're taking away.
Wait, so I just, let me clarify, because what I understood is that this is only for businesses now that are already selling, that are already in existence, that they will be deemed, right? So that we can enforce them to comply. If they sell or if they move, they do have to go through the CUP process. Is that correct or not correct?
They move? What do you mean?
Like if they move from Sanderson to Kirby, they're going to have to.
Right. Different
right.
locations will require, because the CUP stays with the land.
Right. So, but what you're saying is, if they just sell to a new owner and they do already have a CUP, they don't have to come back through here. But if they don't have the CUP and they're deemed, they do have to go through the process. So
that's not how I understand it.
That's right. Is that right?
That's not how I understand it. I just go back to what's been struck here.
But only if it has a CUP. If it has a CUP, they don't have to bring it back through here. If it's an existing business that does not have a CUP, but are deemed, I don't remember what that word is, but
Deemed approved.
deemed approved, and they sell that, then that new owner has to go through the CUP process.
I don't think that's correct.
So if you operate and you do not have a CUP, and you just want to sell it to another party, then deemed approved applies the performance standards
Oh, I see. Okay.
to that business.
So they're already existing though.
And so the
that's why.
rationale behind it is that if we don't have this component, then they will continue to operate as an existing operator with no mechanism for the city to provide those performance standards or apply those performance standards. So that's the part about deemed approved. And I understand Commissioner Worth's concern that this is a lot of data and there's a lot of information to chew on. And what we can do is go back and put each paragraph and kind of compare it to, and it may be overlapping to another section or what have you, but we could do a comparison 1-to-1 so you can see what actually changed or not changed based on that view. And if that makes you more comfortable, and that's fine, we can do that. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get all that organized. But the whole purpose of this is to bring conforming businesses or uses into conformance.
But it removes the CUP, the public hearing process, when either a CUP, a business with an existing CUP or a deemed approved business that has gone through the process and gets up to their standards. It removes the requirement for a new CUP if it's sold to a new company, correct? Which is a current requirement. So that's one of the requirements it removes. And the idea is that it gives a little carrot, if you will, to a non-conforming business to come into compliance so that they can sell.
Well,
Because that's the only benefit. Because why would they not come in?
only if there's a transfer of ownership.
Right. Well,
So if the existing business owner says, well, the conditional use permit takes X number of dollars, X number of time, I don't want to go through that. I'll just hold on to it and continue my business. Then the city loses the opportunity to make that change. So let's say owner A wants to give it to his or her son to take over and continue the business, then we still don't have an opportunity to apply the performance standards without having the deemed approved component.
I
So
guess, is
it
there,
can-
is there another way of doing that without removing the public hearing process for everything?
Well, we're only talking about the existing businesses.
So
Yeah.
I understand, but
So,
I'm just saying the current requirements for a public hearing for a CUP upon if a business is sold, that, is there a way of implementing this deemed approve and still providing the carrot so that we have a mechanism to bring this non-conforming up to standard? Is there maybe another way of doing it without removing the CUP requirement?
Well, if you don't remove that CUP requirement section, then the deemed approved wouldn't be necessary. Because you would make everyone go through a CUP process.
Yeah, I don't see what the difference is to what we have now.
There's no public hearing.
But there.
Correct.
But-
Right,
but
But
with
there-
your,
but there
with
was a
your,
public
what your
hearing.
suggestion is the same thing we have now.
Well, no, I'm, what my suggestion is that we maintain a public hearing. Is that just in a general sense, I don't like to remove our community's opportunity to review and have input on a project.
Well,
but-
I,
It's already
I
been
don't
in
think- I
existence.
think it's
just
there.
Changing
Yeah.
the ownership.
changing title, paper.
Again,
But where in the red ink does it say in the new part? I'm trying to find it where if they relocate, a CUP has to be pulled.
That is part of the process.
So conditional use permit is a entitlement for the land.
That address.
So that location is specific. So if they move and that new location does not have an existing CUP for alcohol sales or any other, then they would have to go through the process. So it's not in this non-conformity section, but it's just in the conditional use permit section that's required based on the zoning.
So to go from one ABC or one tobacco place to another tobacco licensed business, they don't necessarily need to pull that because it's already done.
Correct.
Okay, so if they just go to a new shopping center like the one by Red Robin, that's where they come to the table because there's nothing there, it's a new building.
Correct.
So I can understand public hearing for that because then that's a
Mhm.
new location, that's a new spot, a new everything. But everything's been grandfathered in to where they necessarily don't need to have a public hearing because it's already there, it's already running, it's, it's there. There's nothing different or the change of it. It's already an existing business, but it's not a new one or a new location.
yeah, and like I said, I at a high level, I agree with the intent of this. I just think it's our responsibility to read and understand it. There's a lot of changes on this and there's a lot of questions. And so for me personally, I would appreciate the opportunity to have it broken down so that we can just see what the changes are. And I think you kind of get a sense of what the concerns are, and then maybe we can specifically point to where that's being addressed. If that is something that the commission is amenable to.
Well, John, if you want to document compare, that's great. And I agree that would make it easier to see the difference between one and the other. But I agree with what they've put in front of us here. I'm not in agreement with you on keeping the public hearing. I think what they've put in here is pretty solid. That's my personal opinion.
which is,
I would like to understand. I feel like I'd like to, even just having the old document versus the new document, I think that's all I would need. And I would like another, I apologize. I would like that opportunity to do that. I think I'd be ready by the next commission meeting to make a decision. I'm on the premise and everything that's communicated. I feel like I'm in agreement, and but I would like to just read through it fully for myself.
I do have a question though.
Okay.
Do marijuana dispensaries fall under this?
No, it does not.
Really? Oh, interesting.
that's a whole nother, can of worms.
Colorado, I don't have one in town.
That's a whole nother can of worms.
Commissioners, are you okay with closing the,
Yes.
I have one other question though, because
Okay.
it's something I brought up to HP a while ago on tobacco business. Could we do have the footage 500 feet, I think, from property line to property line, correct? So, have we looked into the one tobacco store that never came to the table here? It wasn't an existing tobacco business in the first place. It's a new business. And they opened up, they've been running. And you were gonna look into it because that is, to me, I think it's definitely closer than 500 feet from property line to property line. So what became of that? Because that's in the red ink here that you're talking about, the 500 feet and the saturation and all that stuff.
I don't quite recall which one it is. I could do a little more research and get back to you. But I don't recall right now what that particular.
I would
store is.
recommend, pardon me,
Hmm?
I would recommend that you send him an email with whatever information you have so that he can follow up that way. I think that would be,
That's like,
that way it's in writing and you have it as a document to look back onto.
Or the cell phone.
I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
Well, I don't know what the motion would be at this point. I'm confused. I would
John, would you
proceed.
like to suggest a motion?
Sure, I would like just simply to move that we continue this item to December 6th and have an opportunity to review a comparative. Is December 6th, is that appropriate? Is that enough time?
Let me ask our principal planner. Do you think that, because I'm only asking her because I'm going to be on vacation and I'll be back on the 28th. So
Well,
I won't
can I
be able to
move then just to
review-
move it to the next appropriate planning commission meeting with, as to when staff has time to provide?
or do we have any businesses that are waiting? right now?
we should really continue to a date specific so that we don't have to go through
Well,
the,
then I'll leave that date,
Yeah.
stay specific to you.
we could put it on the second meeting of January, which would be January 17th.
That's a good question though, real quick, that Jacob just asked. Is there anybody waiting right now?
There is one business that is waiting.
Again, you don't have.
John, you control it in the palm of your hand.
Well, no, I think it's more important
I'm just kidding.
that
I'm kidding.
we feel good about
I agree.
and comfortable about what we vote on. That's why we're here.
Yep, I absolutely agree.
So, so January 17th, I would move to continue this to January 17th and provide an opportunity for the commission to review a comparative Word document showing the changes between the old and the new.
NHP, because I know there was like several ideas mixed around how this would be like is it as easy as just letting us have the first document and the second document and going back and forth, or do we need one with all the strikeouts and like have to like intermix a
There's
document?
software that will do it for you.
I'm just I'm thinking for our business owner who's waiting. I'm thinking about like I just need a week to read through everything. You know what I mean? I don't need a month and a half to get through it. I know.
So
Monique, did you want to say something?
We're working with the applicant on that one right now.
Okay.
Actually, as a matter of fact, we are working on them to make sure they're meeting those criteria. So they we can talk more about that too when we bring that to you. Because we added that criteria for the alcohol. We're just making sure now in real time, what does that look like? Having a business owner comply with those requirements. So this is actually a good experience for us to work with the property owner or the new owner. And so they're in the process right now. And I know that they're willing to work with us. I think with the holidays coming up, there's going to be staff restrictions on availability.
Okay.
So do you think there'll be is it detrimental, since you're currently working with them and going through this process, to wait until the 17th, January 17th?
I don't know if we can answer
Okay.
detriment of a
Well,
business
and
owner, but,
I mean, I want to consider that, but at the same time, I think it's more important to make sure that we're comfortable.
well, I have to also remind you that this is a recommendation to council. So after this, we still have to go to council. So even if we place it on the 6th, there's not a second council meeting in December. So it would have to go through January.
Okay.
So
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so recommendation has been made, so I will second that recommendation.
Could we restate the motion? Was that to continue it to June? And that was
Yes.
made by,
By me,
Commissioner.
yes.
Okay.
And that was approved unanimously. Item 7A, city attorney reports.
Nothing to report.
Item 7B, community development reports. Director King.
I don't have anything to report.
Item 7C, future agenda items. Director King.
So we've been working with a consulting firm to bring before you the environmental justice element and the safety element. So those two items are still being worked on. There may be a secondary work study, which we would encourage commissioners to join in those discussions. But a lot of the safety components have already been addressed by the police department as well as the fire department. So we're coming close to that. So we've just placed it on there as a future item. And we also have a featured church that's coming before you for your review. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Item 8D, planning commissioner report. Director King.
Commissioner Booth,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Hill,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Worth.
Sorry for being a pain, but thank you. And the only thing I had to report is I am the proud grandfather of my 4th granddaughter, Penelope.
Whoa,
So-
all right.
And we're going to be able to go see her next week down in South Carolina. Well,
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. Vice Chair Beanstriffer.
More of a question than anything, downtown related. A couple things. I've been down there since over the weekend and stuff like that. And I'm noticing there's a lot more activities of homeless that are just sitting around Harvard Street by the deli, by the antique store, by the bakery, and they're just kind of asking money. They're on their drugs. They're just not there talking to themselves. And there's just no signs around there at all on Harvard Street, for downtown, historical downtown. There's no loitering or no, anything like that to keep people. It's posted. Nothing's posted there. And is that city, is it city that's responsible for downtown and areas like that to post signs like that for the businesses and for the preservation of downtown?
I wouldn't say necessarily the city, but each business owner can have their own signs. City can also have their sign. I would check with our public works director and the city manager and see what
Street in general.
city can do.
And the other thing I want to report too is, it might have to be a work studies or something with commission, but there's been absolutely nothing coming to the table here when it comes to downtown and anything that's going on with downtown and remodeling, constructions. And a lot of things are just sitting stagnant again. And I just, nothing, people ask me these questions. I go, you know what? I never saw the paperwork. Nothing came to our table. It just slips on past us and goes right through the city. And I think as a commission, we should have our responsibility in trying to preserve downtown and read over the reviews, especially some of these expansions that should be coming to our table. We never saw anything. And I just open discussion that I would like to have as a council about downtown. Other than that, nothing else to report.
That's it.
Downtown, yeah. Well, and that goes also to the point of just the maintaining as much public review as possible on activities that happen, and that's what this commission is for.
And Chair Lemke?
Nothing to report. If there's nothing more, this meeting will be adjourned until the meeting of December 6th, 2022 at 6 p.m.